Hello, I'm Reverend Rick, and it is my honor to be with you today. We really hope that this video is a blessing to you. And if it is, please consider making a donation. People watch our videos locally when they cannot necessarily come to church throughout the United States and the world. So please join us and click the link below and make a donation. Thank you, and let this be a blessing to you.
Let us prepare ourselves. If you put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
Open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
Now just put your hand over your heart and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that which is standing in your way is the way. That which stands in your way is the way. You know, when I think about I practiced alcoholism for a long time. I was a good practitioner. And it was great until it wasn't great, like all of us who are in that situation. It came a time when I couldn't look in the mirror and find somebody that I wanted to be anymore. Friends of mine were unhappy with me as much as I was unhappy with myself. And yet it was the process of working through the recovery from that disease that was the answer for me. Not only for my alcoholism, but for becoming a person who could look in the mirror and say, I like that person again. A person who could say, I don't need to have incomprehensible demoralization every time I wake up in the morning. What stands in the way is the way. Many of you know that for years I had terrible pain in my feet from arthritis. And the doctors would say to me, Georgia, look, we could give you new knees, we can give you new hips, but we cannot give you new feet. You've got to take the weight off. And I ate right through every one of those doctor visits. And it wasn't until I was ready to take drastic measures, because I've been on every diet program known to humankind. I probably sent Weight Watchers kids through college 4 times just being there. It wasn't until I actually was willing to go into that solution when I was able to look at the problem long enough to see that the solution to my life to the arthritis was right there. And when I dropped the 70 pounds, the arthritis was diminished considerably. But that wasn't the only thing. The other part of that was I got a new kind of health involved in my life. I'm able to ride my bike 3 or 4 times a week, 10 miles here to church. I wasn't able to do that before. What's standing in my way was the way. I grew up as a lesbian and came out in the late 60s, 70s, and during that time when you were a lesbian or a gay man or a transgender person, still a transgender person, but during that time for lesbians and gay men, it was like living as a second-class citizen. What stood in my way was the way. When I got involved in the gay empowerment movement, when I got involved in the gay liberation movement, I began to see, oh, I get to define who I am. I get to say who this is right now. What stands in the way is the way. I invite you this week, if there are things standing in your way of happiness, to look in there and see if what's standing in your way isn't actually the way not only to that solution, but to a whole better life for yourself. Well, you know, that phrase, what stands in the way is the way, is actually, I can hear it coming out of Lao Tzu's mouth, can't you? It actually could have come out of Jesus' mouth. It could have come out of Buddha's mouth. It could have come out of Muhammad's or Moses' mouth. It could have come out of any great master's mouth. But who it came out of, the mouth of Brene Brown in her newest book, Dare to Lead. I actually consider Brene Brown one of the great spiritual masters of the modern times as well. Since this book is called Dare to Lead, I want to make sure that we understand what her definition of leader is, because sometimes when you hear the word leader, you think, well, that's not me. I'm not running a big corporation. I'm not the head coach of an NFL team. I'm not. Let's look at what her definition is. Can we put the slide up? A leader is anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes, and who has the courage to develop that potential. That's what a leader is. So it's just not CEOs of major corporations. It's not just people who are head coaches of NFLs or senior pastors of big box churches. It's mothers and fathers who are leaders as well. It's people who are getting together. You know, sometimes in your individual tribe, somebody gets sick, and you put together a team of people who will build casseroles and take them to the doctor, that kind of thing. Those people are leaders. Preschool teachers are leaders in our lives. There's people downtown right now who are the leaders in putting Gay Pride Parade floats together. We're all leaders. There's nobody who's not a leader on some level in this life. So now that we recognize what leaders, how to become a leader, or what a leader is, how do we become a successful leader in our life? Brene Brown says in her book there are 4 components of successful leadership. One is rambling with vulnerability, or as she calls it, embracing the suck. Rambling with vulnerability or embracing the suck in our life. The second one is living into your values. The third one is braving trust. The fourth one is learning to rise. Now, the foundation of all 4 of those is courage. We need to develop and express. We all have courage. We need to develop it and begin to express it some more in our lives. Today, I'm going to spend time on the first one, which is rumbling with vulnerability, or embracing the suck in our life. Now, we often associate that word rumbling with West Side Story. You know, the gangs are together, they're going to do a rumble, or if you watch wrestling, you might hear somebody say, let's get ready to rumble, that kind of thing. She has a much more accurate description of rumbling on page 10 of her book. And that is, a rumble is a discussion, conversation, or meeting defined by a commitment to lean into vulnerability, to stay curious and generous, to stick with the messy. I want to just say that again, to stick with the messy. See, sometimes, and I notice that in my own life, I'm ready to cut and run. If you don't have to, if you're not saying what I want to say, I'm not willing to rumble with you. I want to just cut and run. In order to be able to be a successful leader in our life, in whatever area, we have to be able to stick with the messy in our life. To take a break and circle back when necessary, to be fearless in owning our part, and as the psychologist Harriet Lerner teaches, to listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard. Now it makes common sense, and you think, oh, I know that. I didn't need to come to church this morning to get that. We do, because we need to be reminded all of the time that we need to listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard in our life. So now we know what rumbling means. What about vulnerability? Are we sure that we know what vulnerability is? Vulnerability is an emotion. It's the emotion that we experience during times of uncertainty, times of risk, and times when we go somewhere and do something and we have no idea what the outcome is going to be. That's vulnerability in our life. Vulnerability is not about winning or losing. It's about the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome out there. Here's some great examples of vulnerability. You're vulnerable when you get a divorce and then you go on your first date after the divorce. You're vulnerable during that time. You're vulnerable when you've had 2 miscarriages and you're willing to try and get pregnant again. You're vulnerable when you have to tell a colleague that you're sorry for something that you did. That's a time of vulnerability. You're vulnerable when you're sending your son off to school and the first period is orchestra and he's sure he's going to be first chair in his section and you're not even sure he's going to make the orchestra at all. That's vulnerability in our life. Brene Brown says that after evaluating 400,000 pieces of data, there's one thing she knows for sure. There's not one shred of evidence that vulnerability is weakness. There's not one shred of evidence that vulnerability is weakness in our life. To practice vulnerability, we're going to have courage. We're going to have a lot of courage. So she's got 6 myths of vulnerability, and I want to talk about them, all 6 of them, this morning. The first one is that vulnerability is weakness. Not true. The second one is, I don't do vulnerability. I don't do vulnerability. I hear this a lot. I'm not going to put myself out there. I don't do vulnerability. I make myself small enough that maybe people won't even notice I'm in the room, let alone notice that I'm feeling vulnerable at any given time. But here's the thing. Our daily life is defined by experiences of uncertainty, of risk, and of not being able to control the outcome of what we are experiencing in our life. You can either do vulnerability or vulnerability will do you. Because vulnerability is happening in our lives. It's not about being vulnerable. It's about being willing to choose to own our vulnerability and then to learn from it. See, it's how we rumble, how we rumble with fear, how we rumble with not knowing, with the unexpected in our life. Myth number 2 is I can do it alone. I can do it alone. It's number 3, isn't it? Yeah. I always tell because Kathy, she's my second cue card. Myth number 3, I can do it alone. Look, here's the thing. Spirituality is a group effort. In order to advance spiritually, it's a team sport. You got to get a team around you. Neuroscientist John Cacciano says this. He said he found that to grow into being an adult human being, we have to avoid being solitary and autonomy. You cannot become an adult human being if you are solitary and if you are avoiding connection with others. And that's why social scientists are so concerned right now about our dependence on the internet, because we're forgetting how to have conversations with one another. We're forgetting how to have face-to-face conversations. The point of becoming an adult human being is to become somebody that others can depend on. The point of becoming an adult human being is to become someone others can depend on it. And he says this, whether we know it or not, our brain and our biology is hardwired to be in community. It's hardwired to be with one another face to face in the good and in the messy. We're hardwired for that. Brene Brown says to give us some help, she recommends we get what she calls a square squad. A square squad is that you take one piece of paper 1 inch by 1 inch, and you write down the names of people on that square squad, just 1 inch by 1 inch, whose opinions matter to you. Not people whose opinions don't matter, but who are given to you all the time, but opinions of people who matter to you. You put them on that square squad. You may, because it's so tiny, you may have to take some off because others made a better grade for you in that square squad. And then you reach out to them and you say, you know, I I was just spending some time thinking about people whose opinion mattered to me, and you're one of those people. And I want to thank you for having the honesty to tell me when I'm wrong in this life, to be real with me. Who should not go on your square squad? People who are second up to you. People who are just going to be yes people, who are always going to tell you that you're doing the right thing, even when you're not. Myth number 4 or 5, I don't know what. Myth. You cannot engineer uncertainty and discomfort out of vulnerability. You can't do it. We try and make it so that it's less difficult. But remember, it's called embracing the suck. It's not called embracing the unpleasant. It's going to hurt. And we have to be willing to hurt in order to be able to be the kind of leaders that we want to be in the world. We have to know that can happen. Ernest Holmes says it this way. He says, instead of saying what is standing in your way is the way, he says it this way. He says, you have to look into your problems until you see the face of God. Until you see the face of good in your problems. And when we can begin to do that, then we can own some power in our life. We own some vulnerability. The next one is trust comes before vulnerability. Trust comes before vulnerability. You know, I say frequently in this church, whatever we learn that isn't helpful to us, we have to unlearn. One of the things we have to unlearn is this notion that if we expose ourselves, if we let somebody know our tender spots, if we let somebody know what we really care about in the world, that it's just a matter of time until they betray us. That's not true. That's not true. You know, she said she got some help with this with her daughter, Ellen. Ellen is in 3rd grade, and she's a child not given to drama. You know, some kids are given to drama and other kids aren't. Ellen was not given to drama, and she ran home one day and she slammed the door and she ran upstairs, and she could hear her cry, just sobbing her little heart out. Now, if you're a mom or you're a dad, you know that hearing your own baby sob their little heart out and you don't know what's wrong, that can just break your heart, can it? And so she finally went in and she asked Ellen, what happened? She said, I did something stupid at school today, and it was embarrassing, and I told a friend, and the friend told the whole class, and when we went in after recess, all the kids were laughing at me. She said it was so bad that Mrs. Honadell, our teacher, took half the marbles out of the jar. And it kind of piqued Brene Brown's interest, and she said, half the marbles out of a jar? Well, what does that mean? And Ellen said, well, when we do something good collectively in our class, she puts marbles in a jar. When we do something not good collectively, she takes marbles out of the jar. She said she took half the marbles out of the jar. I've never seen her do it. That's how bad it was. I'll never trust again, Ellen says. Well, Brene Brown, being a researcher in vulnerability and trust, knew that she had to deal with this right away. So that when she got to be Brene Brown's age, she didn't have to unlearn it then. She could unlearn it right now. She said, well, you know, Ellen, here is the thing. You have a jar in your life. Just imagine you have a jar in your life. And every time a friend of yours does something like protect your secret, does something kind to you, does something nice that you watch her or him do, put some marbles in your imaginary jar. And then if somebody does something not nice, you take some marbles out of your imaginary jar. She said, I bet if you keep looking for people in your life who are doing nice things for you and to you and around you, before long you'll have a jar that's filled with marbles. She said to Ellen, do you have any friends that right now we could put some marbles in your jar? And she said her answer helped her understand the nature of people we can trust. She said, yeah, I have 2 friends. I have Leona and I have Sally. She said, well, what does Leona do? She said, well, when we were at the soccer game last week, Oompa and Uma were there, and she said to me, "Oh, your Uma and Oompa are here." And she said, "You'd give her marbles for recognizing your grandparents were in the stands?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "Look, Mom, I have 8 grandparents with all the divorces and they're married." She said, "I think it was pretty spectacular that she remembered Uma. She gets jars." She said, "Okay, well, what about Sally?" She said, "Sally, well, Sally's my half-butt friend." She said, "Yeah. When I go into the cafeteria, and if in our table with all our friends, if there are no more chairs, Sally will scooch over. She puts half her butt on the chair, and I put half my butt on the chair. She gets marbles." And what Brene Brown realized after hearing that, it's not the heroic things that people do that make us trust them. It's the little gifts that we give one another that helps us to trust them. The last one is vulnerability must have full disclosure. That is a myth. Vulnerability must have full disclosure is a myth. And the reason it's a myth is because we think that when we hear this, that we have to tell everybody everything. That's not what you do. Have to have a posse. You do have to have your square squad that you can go to and tell them your stuff. Well, we don't tell everybody everything. You know, she works with Fortune 500 companies, and when she was talking about this issue, she was talking about sharing and being disclosing, and that's important to recognize your vulnerability, to be willing to disclose. And so this young CEO, who hadn't been there very long, came up to her afterward and he said, "Okay, I got it. I feel much better now. I've got it. I'm going to bring my leadership team together, and I'm going to tell them that I'm in way over my head, and that we're losing money like crazy, and we'll probably have to, the company's going to go under." Now, I feel good about it. It's off my chest. I feel really good about it. And she said, "Well, let's go have coffee." She said, "You do need to tell them that. You need to tell somebody that, but you need to find a mentor that you tell that to. You need to find somebody who can help you with that. You certainly don't go out and tell your team, because they're going to be scared to death if you do that." The point is that we need to find people that we can disclose our vulnerabilities to. It's important. Running around here like we don't have any problems ever is not helping us. It's not helping us move ahead spiritually. It's not helping us move ahead as people who belong to a society. But we want to be discerning about how we do it. Parents, we need to be able to share our vulnerabilities with one another, but we don't do it with our kids, because they're the last ones who should know that we don't know what we're doing here. Creating change in our lives can feel really hard. It can feel really, really hard. But I promise you, if you will begin to work with these 6 myths in your life, begin to get them and understand them and work with them in your life, the change that will come won't be stuff that you have to push. It'll just begin to unveil itself around you. You know, in our philosophy, we often teach there's nothing to heal, only more God to be revealed. That doesn't mean scripture. It doesn't mean praying. It means revealing the presence of God within ourselves to one another in our life. Well, that's the first of the series of this fabulous book. If you want to get it, it's called Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. You can follow along with it. Next week we're going to go into one of the other parts of it called Kind is Clear, Unkind is Unclear. And it seems, again, like a simple issue. We're going to talk about more stuff than that. But sometimes, you know what, I think we go to sleep because spirituality is not as hard, complicated, or difficult to wrap our heads around as we make it to be. It's actually pretty simple stuff. Let's take this message into prayer, knowing that there's only one power. So I just let it run through me. I don't want to get my bloated nothingness out of the way and allow it to move through me now. I give thanks for that. I give thanks for every single person here today. I release this word into the law together with self, and so